Okay, so existentialism is a form of philosophical inquiry that explores the problem of human existence and centers on the subjective experience of thinking, feeling, and acting. So they explore issues like relating to meaning, purpose, value. Is existence just human? This is also a question, I think, for our disruptive innovation channel, because it's all about artificial intelligence, as like, how do we treat machines that may be sentient but not biological? So is existence only subjective to biological existence, or is it in is it consciousness in a sense, right? So if you could teach a machine to become conscious or give consciousness to something, a rock or a spirit
I
or a
also think
god,
that calls into question the idea of, or the definition of natural. Like
Mm,
what is it to be natural? Because I think that's generally what people will apply to, existence is like, in order to be a being, that you have to have, or you have to be naturally occurring. But in, what you're talking about with artificial intelligence and sentience being given to robots and machines and so forth, at what point, like, because it won't ever meet necessarily the natural definition, but once it starts to develop its own thoughts and its own reactions, I don't know that a robot or an AI can feel per se, but depending on which Marvel movie you subscribe to, I guess. But
and you
but
could also go down the valley that, like, it has purpose and value and
right,
meaning, even though it may not be sentient. So, then
right.
if it does existence, is it just about those three things? Because, from existentialism, it seems like that's what we're trying to unpack here, is like, what is the value of existing? What is the meaning of existing? And what is really the purpose of existing? So that brings me to those three questions, Rachel, like,
Mm-hmm.
which is like, where the heck do we come from? Why are we here? And where are we going? I mean, I think so many people are trying to explore origins. Look at any Netflix, right? I mean, like, there's
Yeah.
so many shows right now trying to figure out what's the real history. Are we from the sky? Do we have alien brothers and sisters here? Are they just visiting us once in a while? Did they create us? Are there gods? Is it really, do we, maybe the scriptures are true? Maybe it's, maybe they're both true and got lost somewhere in translation and just became like a hybrid of stories and narratives, which is also why we explore narratives on our show. Because it's also part of being. I think this is, I think the things that we talk about on the show that we mentioned in the intro, right? Narratives, consciousness, design, innovation. These are like the pillars of a community, of course, and a community is just a collective of existing together, a collection of existence, I suppose. And so we're just trying to break those down into different topics on the show, right? And between us and our guests, like, how to talk about, what does it mean to be human within these pillars, within innovation? Like, why are we getting so powerful? Why are we becoming gods? Do we have a responsibility to direct that, in a healthy way for the planet and people? Or do we just manipulate people and enslave them like we have been doing for thousands of years? I mean, what paradigm do we want to
Right.
follow? Can we even
Right.
change paradigms? I've got so many questions. Like, I want to be a guest on this show, and that's what this gathering's about. So someone start
I'm
someone
so
start
glad you're
asking me
here.
someone
You and
start
your
asking me
questions.
questions. Like, ask me
Well,
questions about existence. Beth, go on. Sorry.
yeah, I do. I have an idea. No, this week I've been thinking about aliens, as you do.
As
And
one
I was,
as one
Yeah,
does
as
as
one
one
would,
does.
on a
I
Monday
mean,
night or something.
yeah,
naturally,
naturally.
while doing the dishes or whatever. And I feel like, historically for people, it hasn't gone very well when one group that is more advanced visits a group that is less advanced, right? So if we had an alien race come and visit us, would they look at our consciousness and our existence, and would they deem it valuable enough to continue to allow it to go on? Would they? Because the reason I'm asking this is because it does inform what our existence really is. How much meaning do we assign to it? You know,
Hmm.
do you have to be from Earth?
So the next question beneath that question then is, the filter, right? The Fermi paradox filter, which is all
Mm-hmm.
about, you know, if you're going to reach a certain type 2 civilization, right, where you're
Mm-hmm.
spacefaring and you understand the nature of multiple dimensions and stuff, can um malevolent energy that's not conscious, that is separate, that is, not connected and not evolved consciously, can it make it to this type 2 stage without destroying itself? And I think that it's happened for sure. But then that would also say about the benevolent species that have also evolved and realized like they don't have to take over their neighbor because they have understood the nature and consciousness of the universe. If they've reached type 2 civilization, they get it. They're like, we're all connected. I don't need to take over a planet. I don't need resources. I can build my own resources because that's the consciousness I'm informed from.
I think, and this is part of narrative too, but like we constantly have this weighing, right, of good and bad, right? Light and dark, like, benevolent, malevolent, right? And so, but if you really like, so like if you're in the like, spiritual hoodoo community, right? Like you always hear that running definition of I'm an infinite spiritual being experiencing a temporary human existence or living a temporary human existence, right? And it's like it's been that way and then depending on what you kind of subscribe to, it's you need to do the shadow work to integrate, or you're like chasing
the why behind
the light, right? Like you're chasing the light as hard as you can to never look at the dark, like depending on what you subscribe to again. But is there, since we're talking about existence, is there really such a thing as good and bad?
Yin and yang. That makes me think of like the I Ching, which I love, and I recommend anyone who's listening out there to go understand your 64 hexagrams and do some I Ching magic mystic tarot reading stuff. But the I Ching is actually really fascinating because all of the parables, all of the stories in the I Ching describe exactly what you're saying. I mean, it is the oldest, I think, scripture or text basically, and it's in a sense of our existence. So I would say that in the I Ching might be what you're talking about. Like the existence is a snake chasing its tail or a snake eating its tail, this an infinite idea that like, or the torus. We love this sacred geometry torus shape, which unfolds on itself like a donut and then recycles, the energy.
A circle rotated on an axis.
Thank you. Listeners there. Beth
looks like a donut.
Beth is our local resident educator
and therefore
library.
It is good. It looks like a donut, and therefore it is good.
So back to the good and the bad, because Rachel, you brought in, good and bad, and our kind of is there such a thing? Maybe we take off the labels, like maybe we take off the good and the bad, and it's just the two sides of life, of existence.
Because Beth, we talk about that a lot. We talk about like, for instance, like in the Bible, for the religious folks out there, there's always an archetype of an enemy. There's always the archetype of somebody who like fell from heaven or whatever. But if they didn't fall from heaven, the story would have never gone on. There would never be a good guy. There would never be a heaven to get to. Every scripture is always filled with this. I mean, the archetypes of Joseph Campbell, which is like that there has to be a fall, but within that darkness, within that shadow, is the light. Like it is actually good, because for the yin and yang to exist, they have to constantly chase each other, like two electrons.
I think you have to have the energy of one to push the other all the time, like a constantly fluxing energy.
Yeah. And then they're one, if you pull out, right? They're one circle. They're part of the same circle, both light and dark, chasing each other. And so how funny, Rachel, what you're saying too. It's like, yeah, in the context, if you pull out from like God's perspective, if you'd say like Beth, or the universal perspective at the whole, then there is no bad and good. It's all just chaos and order. A star gets destroyed, it creates elements,
and thermodynamics.
Sucks all back together again and becomes a star again. So it's like light becomes dark and dark becomes light, and it's just like.
And since we love Disney movies, I mean, like we have to just continue on this path. But Inside Out.
Oh, Inside Out.
But so I mean, they're personified. But I mean, really, when we've had this discussion with people before, this light and dark conversation, the good and bad, the coexistence of all things, right? It's like you can't actually necessarily experience or appreciate rather happiness without having experienced sadness, right? So it's like, how do you prove a negative?
From this perspective. From this perspective, right? So at this little dot that we're at in the dimension of space and time, we can only measure things in a certain way, right? And so we're only measuring binary ones and zeros. It really, like Rick and Morty got it so right on point, which I love. It's like it's just a bunch of ones and zeros out there, because it really is. It's a bunch of electrons that are blinking in and out of existence. They're either a zero or a one, and none of us actually touch anything, right? We know that. Nothing is actually physical. This is all like holographic, actually. It's all like existing and then not existing.
Vibrational.
It's
Yeah.
it's popping in and out. And this is what a lot of people are talking about in quantum physics is like, where the hell do those electrons go when they go into full potentiality, full potentiality, when they become everything? What is that place?
What is that?
That's the dark matter conversation
and what the heck is dark energy? And when there was a big bang, why wasn't there an equal amount of matter and dark matter? Why didn't they just cancel each other out? Yeah.
So when we disappear,
I don't know, by the way.
Nobody knows anything on this show, Beth. This should be our tagline: under one sky. We don't know anything because we're standing in a place of just query.
Yeah, right? Questioning, discovery, exploration.
Exploration, exactly. Is it physical? Is it, is it here? Is it not here? Does it exist or does it not exist? To be or not to be?
But is that the lesson? Like, is that so back to Beth's definition, is that the journey? Because so you guys know I was raised Buddhist, and a lot of that, so the Heart Sutra, one of the, I would call it a core scripture, but so one of the things is everything is nothing and nothing is everything, right? And then it's learning detachment because everything is nothing and nothing is everything, right? So releasing attachment to the material, and I feel like that's a common thread amongst most theologies. I think let's bring all the listeners into our inner thought process, shall we? So
behind the scenes,
if they dare, go with us.
If they dare, we're nuts, but we sing a lot. So we talked t-shirt.
T-shirts.
We sing a lot. We're nuts.
No, we're nuts, but we sing a lot. Our conversation the other night, where you were saying that the folks that you work with are at COP in Egypt, and they were saying that we can't fix poverty, right? And Beth had thoughts that were contrary to that there is a way, we just haven't thought of it yet, right? And I agree. And Beth, we're planning your presidential campaign, but
Beth for president. I've been saying that for years.
Talk about an unknown dark horse candidate. Wow. I would be the one.
Which is exactly
anything can happen.
I get 2 votes, maybe 3, or if my mom votes. Okay.
No, but I think that that's something that we should do, think of it. We just talked about releasing materialism, fixing a lot of issues, right? But the core of this, where this all started, was our desire to leave the world a better place. So that legacy that you talked about, but wanting to solve this problem of poverty. And so to hear that scientifically or mathematically, right, that it's not necessarily possible in the timeline that we were looking at.
But then at the same time, how long have we really been, I'm coming back to you, Rachel. How long have we really been a global community? Well, we've been building our United States society, and, Europe has been building various countries, building their society, and South America and whoever, pick your thing. We haven't been global that long. So we haven't thought about it. It's just been people in that country just don't have what we have here, and that's too bad.
Nor did we have the data. Data.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
We never, we couldn't have measured it. Yeah. So,
well, and I'll bring the light dark conversation back too, is, I would say the most recent global, I guess, reckoning, if you will, is the pandemic, right? And so now all of a sudden it's everybody's problem.
Yeah.
Right. And it always seems to be that until everyone has a problem, it's a separate problem, right? Like, to your point, it's their problem, it's their poverty, it's blah blah's issue, right? But now it's, well, wait, so this country is further ahead on a solution, let's get in on that,
or you feel it, like Ukraine goes to war and you show up at the supermarket and bread is €6.
Yeah,
true story. Or the bread's not there because the grain shipment is so disrupted right now that the bread can't get there, and there's so many bread shops that are closing that used to have sell bread. So that you feel it actually now when something happens far away. It's weird. It disrupts your whole oh, okay, yeah, I'm seeing this.
Because we've been allowed, especially here, and our audience generally is going to be people who have access to the internet and Wi-Fi and apps and so forth.